is accumulated in the combined interest of states, corporations, by means of eviction, along with the social and architectural cleansing. In the first stage, the area is allowed to be run down until it becomes almost worthless. And it is this point that property developers will buy it at its cheapest rate in order to make the most profit, when the process of what they call valorization is complete. This is what is occurring in our own site in Pendleton, where the old fixed capital investment in the form of a council estate from the 1960s has now become a hindrance to realizing the new financial potential of the area. According to Rachel Weber, the accumulation process experiences an uncomfortable friction when capital is still trapped in steel beams and concrete. The cannibalization of public housing or social housing, city buildings and public spaces through this gentrification process is an attack on the poor. This is what we're referring to as the war at home in the title of this paper.
Pendleton is characterised by long-term poverty. Health, educational attainment and life expectancy are significantly below the UK national average. It is in the 10% most deprived areas in England, where over a quarter of children grow up in poverty. The skyline of Pendleton is still dominated by the remains of a modernist-inspired council project from the 1960s, an attempt to produce a so-called civilised city for working people that stood in opposition to the squalor of the 19th century slums, produced by the rapid growth of the industrial city. By the 1980s, Pendleton, once famous for its industry, saw factories and docks shut. Today, Pendleton is a place of low pay, precarious labour, and welfare subsistence. David Harvey notes that from the 1970s, local governments have been increasingly starved of central funding and had to become more entrepreneurial-minded to meet the shortfall. To provide homes, they have no choice but to enter into alliances with private developers. This is what happened in Pendleton. In 2003, publicity about a £600 million housing project gloried in its aims for better housing, stating that 1,200 council homes would be refurbished. And John's Flat, where we're based, is one of those that has been refurbished. And in this process, also 1,600 new private and so-called affordable homes would be built. What the publicity concealed was that hundreds of serviceable public homes would be demolished and tenants evicted to clear the sites for these new residences.
The origins of photography coincided with the growth of the industrial city, and as such, it is not purely by chance that urban development has become a major subject for photographic activity. Photographic representations of the city stabilize the heterogeneous and unfixed nature of urban sites by what they include and by what they exclude. As Balshaw and Kennedy caution, the city is inseparable from its representations, but neither is it identical to or reducible to them. The positioning and use of such visualizations, as well as what they render visible and invisible, ask us to consider issues of power and ideology. As Parker and Long note, urban redevelopment is animated today by a particularly intense politics of vision. In their analysis of Birmingham's ongoing transformation, they note it is the visual markers that are key to communicating the new narrative about the coming urban renaissance. Here, visions of the city contrasting the different skylines and buildings being presented. The same is true for our own area in Pendleton, where the key images of the housing development scheme have been generated by corporate practices attempting to mediate the changes. Predictably slick computer-generated images of yet-to-be-constructed apartments direct the curious to the newly established marketing suites. Jansen and Lagerhurst, in their study, comment on how this type of corporate imagery uses fantasy and effect to convert the real into a sign value, which creates for them what they term emotive geographies, which are seductive both to potential investors and the eventual buyers of the properties. In this particular case, these photographs, however, were used to mediate the developer's plans for the housing estate to local people still living there, in order to reassure them as to the desirability of the changes by highlighting the aesthetics of the transformation. As Jansen and Lagerhurst note, these images become condensed narratives that make legible the proposed changes. They stabilize the perception of a contested neighborhood by providing a clear teleology through the creation of a new urban imaginary or a future gaze. The persuasiveness of these gentrifying visuals masks the large number of people displaced by the demolitions and the impossibility for local people to actually afford any of the new properties tantalizingly labeled as affordable homes. As we have already seen in Pendleton, they concealed the financial imperative behind the £600 million regeneration PFI scheme, which actually was the theft of public housing in order to revitalise private capital.
From the start of our collaboration in 2004, we documented the estate, slowly recording and responding to the gradual changes through a multiplicity of means. We've learnt about the housing estate through repeated observations of its minutiae, or what Perec termed the infraordinary. We learnt to start from the ground as a method, and then to bring our observations into critical dialogue, into dialogue with critical theory and the histories we were also encountering elsewhere. We involved other people in our work, mainly by walking through the estate, but we steered away from the dubious and doubly exploitative trend for socially engaged aesthetics that expanded around the time we started our collaboration, and is seemingly unaware of the way it embeds hierarchies and exploitation. We also started to understand that we could, without generalizing and globalizing thinking, make connections with other places we were able to study or visit, such as Guangzhou, where we saw more dramatic images of ruination and heard about more violent forms of displacement by development than in Salford. In this ongoing process, photography, or rather a variety of photographies, has always been central to our practice. Over the last 12 years, we've built up a large-scale photographic inventory of the estate. And unlike the neoliberal futuricity of the developers, we've cast our gaze to the continual present of everyday life. We realized early on that this version of the process of accumulation by dispossession was characterized by a long, drawn-out staging. Rob Nixon's concept of slow violence has helped provide us with a vocabulary appropriate to the gravity of the situation. Nixon's work highlights a type of violence against the world's poor that occurs gradually and out of sight, a violence of delayed destruction that is dispersed across time and space, an attritional violence that is typically not viewed as violence at all. He calls for representational and narrative strategies capable of challenging such unspectacular and incremental violence. Whilst Nixon's work relates specifically to the violence of environmental contamination, degradation, and exploitation in the Southern Hemisphere, we believe his ideas can usefully be redeployed to Pendleton, where an attrition, both physical and psychological, accompanies the induction phase of gentrification. We want our work to resist and pose a potent counter-narrative to the exploitative and unjust process of accumulation by dispossession. I'm not sure if we've got there yet, are we? But one of the photographies we employ is a descriptive documentary practice to which which serves to describe, without other artistic or stylistic interventions, the ongoing inventory of environment, structures and objects on the estate. We are using the evidential qualities of photography pragmatically to track the unfolding reality of everyday life that belies the utopian futures portrayed by developers.
There is, of course, a historic and ongoing discussion about photography and legibility in relation to the social and economic world that it represents. Strategies of construction, abstraction, and naturalism have all offered practitioners a tactic in dealing with the enormity of the task of making visible the drivers behind the physical and social terrains that we produce and are produced by. Saskia Sassen, in particular, questions photography's ability to deal with the contemporary world and its power to make legible these key drivers of today's emergent terrains and to visualize their connections to the networks that articulate the current political economy. We have no illusions that the naturalism of our own photographic practice isn't open to all the criticisms that have thwarted social documentary practices in their quest for a type of realism or truth. As Martha Rosler notes, naturalism runs the risk of locking us into an uncritical engagement with learnt cultural narratives and interpretations. We are susceptible to falling into commonsensical interpretations that fail to challenge the seamless envelope of ideology that stitches together everyday life. So to summarize our current thoughts on our photographic practice to date, we stand by our decision to witness the theft of land and the social degradation that accompanies it in the area we're working in. We want to develop more critically in relation to the role of the witness, which has in its past quite a checkered history. We are committed to working slowly outside the context and pressures of neoliberal academia, which requires increasingly swift, measurable research conclusions. We're also resisting the idea that we could spectacularize or make art of the politics of space. We avoid the derivative conceptual aesthetics that dominate the art world and render everything, including the photographic document, often meaningless and somehow blurred. We also treat photography as a spatial and social practice as much as one that makes surfaces. We incorporate production, analysis, and at times elicitation practices and historical work into the scope of the work we do with photography, if you look at some of our other work. We resist any tendency at the moment to fetishize photography. We need to keep it in its place as a multimodal discursive tool. As an example of this, we use photography in conjunction with what we term sight writing, which is a practice we have evolved which picks at questions beneath the surface of the image. This type of writing builds on what we could call an everyday photographic eye, which seeks out and ponders apparently inconsequential details as well as grand sweeps of the landscape. And we will finish this last bit just by Jane will be doing a reading, and I'll be showing works from a particular space we're working on called Atoll Street, which is an area in Pendleton which people have been displaced.
Okay. The Atoll Street area is a thin wedge lodged between busy roads. This is a place that could easily be, and frequently is, passed by. Signs outside the show home's marketing suite welcome you to the heart and soul of Salford. Discover urban innovation surrounded by green open spaces, and own your own home for £87,000. Continuing down Atoll Street, beyond the fence draped with green mesh, is a view of the new housing development's pointy red roofs. Most of the original houses in the Atoll Street area are through terraces, 2 up, 2 down, with yards. The yards of the now vacant homes contain the parting accumulation of rubbish, things unwanted in the new home, broken toys, drinks cans, stacks of mushy magazines, torn clothes. In the absence of gardeners, the small front gardens, which you can still see, were once stocked with flowering plants, vines and cypress shrubs, are overgrown, running to seed and dank. Between the homes are pedestrianised areas with benches and mature trees, like the tilia with intoxicating foliage. All materials of value have been removed, is stencilled on the boarded-up windows. I listened to Athol Street ventriloquising the vocabulary of value and worthlessness. Rose comes out of her house, walking in our direction. We have previously only ever observed each other from a distance. She is telling us about her imminent move, pointing towards the new flats at the top of the road. She will be moving to a one-bedroom flat soon, not far from her daughter, who will move over there, says Rose, pointing to one of the unfinished houses on the building site. I don't know why they wanted to get rid of these houses. There's nothing wrong with them. The council have really let the outside go, so it needs a bit of work. But inside, I have everything I want. They never listen to us. Rose is anxious about her 6 grandchildren, who frequently stay the night all together in her 3-bedroomed house. A victim of the bedroom tax, Rose cannot pay for and will not be allocated more than 1 bedroom. She acknowledges that she's lucky to remain near her family. Some elderly neighbours have not been so fortunate. Rehoused in an unfamiliar place, one of them was robbed, and others mourn the loss of neighbourly support and familiarity. These are the unremarkable losses of regeneration. Incalculable for the victims, they will never figure in any official reckoning. The streets surrounding Athol Street have already disappeared from the developers' maps, and gradually the residents leave too. Sometimes when we don't have time to walk around the estate, we drive. And so we discover that the week Rose moves out, a film crew moves in. Unexpected activity alerts us. Black-clad figures, motorbikes, security guards, a huddle of special police. For a brief moment, we believe we're witnessing a police raid on one of the remaining tenants. Then we see large vans spewing out cables, tripods, and lighting stands, young people with clip and clapperboards, and an armed response vehicle faked with the help of outsized vinyl lettering. A small front garden is illuminated by a large silver umbrella, as if an extraterrestrial abduction is taking place. The drabness, the weedy, flaking, empty grey streets are momentarily spectacular. The boxy, pebble-dashed homes are briefly valued, or maybe revalued, as a location for an urban crime series. Okay, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Jen and John, for this marvelous and very interesting communication. I will present now Maira Mora, that will present us a communication about photography and marginality, strategies of visibility and puissance d'insoumission. Will you speak in French?
No, I speak in English.
Okay. Maira Mora is a doctorant in esthétique at Université de Paris, by the direction of Jean-Marc Lachaud. It's a scholarship with the study Mondialisation et études culturelles au Centre Pompidou. His works make the interrogation about the reports between art and politics. And her works make the interrogation about the reports between art and politics at Chile after the dictatorship just to the actuality. it's now doing a research with the title Aesthetical and Politic, the Art of the Engagement at Chile since 1973. It's okay?
Okay. So, thank you all for being here. My work, the title of my work is Photography and Marginality, Strategies of Visibility and the Potential of Insubordination. So, what could be a photographic language of dissent? In this presentation, I will try to explore this idea by focusing on the work of two Chilean contemporary photographers, Paz Errázuriz and Alejandro Olivares. Born in 1944, Errázuriz is the author of a thematic series based on zones of neglect and exclusion brought about by the hyper-capitalist modernity that the military dictatorship savagely imposed. Born in 1981, Olivares continues the line of former documentary photographers, assuming the heritage of military dictatorship and thus assuming an active role in the construction of collective memory. Paz Errázuriz and Alejandro Olivares focus in particular on the rough edges of the social and historical texture of Chile. Belonging to two different generations, their work covers a period from the violence of the dictatorship to a democratic present ravaged by neoliberalism inequality. Their visual approach concentrates on bodies that have been mistreated in contexts of economic exploitation, government negligence, unprotected rights, undelivered justice, and social abandonment, among others. Both the geographic area of their work, Chile, as well as the major subject of their photography, marginality, define Errázuriz and Olivares as artists that work on the margins and from the margins. This presentation will explore the specific strategies of visibility and representation of the marginal body pursued by these two photographers. Power, visibility, and dissent will be the keynotes of an analysis constructed on the thesis that one and the same photograph can exhibit both the exercise of power over the body and the potential of insubordination and revolt against the normative requirements. So my first part is called A Photographic Language of Dissent. Chilean photographer Paz Errázuriz began her career during the military dictatorship. In a context where the authoritarian regime installed an extreme conservatism based on Christian sexual morality and a family model where gender roles were rigidly defined, Errázuriz developed a photographic language of dissent. Her thematic series designated zones of exclusion, where the society of surveillance had relegated the unwanted subjects, the suspects, the abnormal. Her black and white photographs revealed the world of psychiatric hospital, brothels, and transvestites. These unconventional bodies, living outside the frame of the authoritarian normativity, form an anonymous mass deprived of voice and visibility. We are thus confronted to the first pair of concepts we will work on: visibility and visibility, and the capacity to speak opposed to the fact of being reduced to silence. It would be useful to remember here the famous question Gayatri Spivak asked: can the subaltern speak? As she pointed out, if speaking involves not only to speak, but also to be heard, opening thereby the possibility of a response, then the answer must be no. The subaltern cannot speak. According to Spivak, an activist, a committed theorist, or in this case, a committed artist, must do something in order to lead the subaltern to the discourse. Spivak affirms, I quote, "The only way of producing this discourse is integrating the subaltern as subaltern in the hegemony circuit," end of quote. In which way could a photographer lead the subaltern to the discourse? Simply by photographing, by making the invisible visible. Because to frame, to select a part of the visible world, to adopt a certain point of view means to take a position with respect to distance, perspective, and optics, but also with respect to what to show, what should be revealed. We must not forget that one of the distinguishing features of the image is the expectation of a gaze. For Marie-José Monson, the construction of the gaze is a political duty. At the same level, the right distance or the place of the spectator is also a political issue. Adam's Apple is a photographic essay that Paz Errázuriz created in the transvestite brothels of Santiago and Talca between 1984 and 1990, during the military dictatorship in Chile. In 1919, a homonymous book was published compiling a text at the edge of testimony, reportage, and ethnography, written by Claudia Donoso, and the photographs Errázuriz had taken the previous years. Starting from the first lines of the text, one can feel an atmosphere of repression and violence. I quote, in 1984, taking our cue from half-forgotten hints Pilar had given Paz, we reached the barrio, so the neighborhood, La Sota. There was a police van parked outside the brothel, which somehow undermined the idea that Talca was the only remaining place in Chile where the transvestites were not being harassed by police. The cells of La Jaula were overcrowded. To maximize the working space, there were 2 male whores per room, and each room contained all their belongings. On the walls of these cells, the images of the Virgin of Pompeii and of St. Pancras were juxtaposed with lithographs of the Swiss Alps, cuttings from pornographic magazines and posters of Michael Jackson. Chilean transvestites spend so much of their lives locked up either in a brothel or in jail. End of quote. This was a brutal word, separated from all the legitimate words in Chilean society. The photographic work was carried out under extremely difficult circumstances, at a time when its protagonists were being subjected to curfews, political and police persecutions. As Andrea Giunta points, I quote, these were bodies exposed to danger, situated in conflict zones, threatened by the imminence of many different forms of violence, from their clients, from the military and civilian police, from their social relationships. End of quote. It is obvious that these subjects were constantly exposed to the exercise of power over them. However, if we come back to our initial thesis, can we nonetheless find a potential of insubordination? As far as the photographer is concerned, it is clear that Paz Errázuriz didn't accept the totalitarian ideal of a woman, which consisted in being at home, silent, taking care of the kids. On the contrary, she put herself also in danger by making the critical gesture of engaging herself with people that were constantly threatened as they permanently diverged from the norm. As her photographed subjects, the constant transgression of the frontiers, real, symbolic, or imaginary, denote the limits of obedience determined by social normativity, and, at the same time, the subject's own strategies of disobedience, the biographies and the genders that refuse to be molded by the thematic system of dominant typologies. Discordance is thus expressed simply being someone else than expected, defying the rule that is imposed by rigidly defined gender roles. My second part is called An Invitation to Dare to Look. At the very beginning of the so-called democratic transition, Paz Errázuriz started another series of photographs in another peripheral zone of society, a psychiatric hospital situated 200 kilometers from the capital, Santiago. After having spent many years visiting the asylum, alone at the beginning and then accompanied by the Chilean writer Diamel El Tid, Soul's Infarct came into being, a book that brings together Errázuriz photographs and a text quite difficult to catalog, because, as Adam's Apple, It is situated at the edge of several literary genders. The Filipino Insane Asylum was originally a hospital for tuberculosis patients built in the 1940s. But as tuberculosis was eventually eradicated through vaccines, the installations were refashioned as a psychiatric hospital receiving patients from the country's various asylums. Most of the mentally ill patients were indigent, and some of them don't even have a civil identification, being catalogued as in nomen nescio, an expression used to denote an anonymous or unnamed person. There is an institutional expression of the visual definition of insanity in The Birth of the Asylum, where, quoting Foucault, madness no longer exists except as sin. The science of mental disease, as it could develop in the asylum, would always be only of the order of observation and classification. It could not be a dialogue, end of quote. Nonetheless, with her photographic work, Paz Errázuriz tries to do exactly the opposite, to restore the broken dialogue. Her camera focuses not only on the mentally ill, but on the mentally ill lovers living in the psychiatric hospital of Putaendo. This simple element, the fact of being in love and the common gestures that go with it, establishes a connection between the viewer and the portrait subjects. We are all able to recognize a hug, a kiss, a tender look. Certainly, the patients locked up in this psychiatric hospital lack a rational language, and their social environment has ended up ignoring them. But while the dominant culture has marginalized these patients from the social scene, Paz Errázuriz restores to them a leading role within her photographic project, counteracting the collective oblivion with a luminous photographic presence. Paz Errázuriz photographs exhibit the utter helplessness, but also the emotional survival that one can clearly see in the minimal gestures of the loving couples of Putaendo. Errázuriz wields the power of photography to make visible the ignored lives of the mentally ill, and to do so, she works in complicity with the protagonist of her images. Rather than being passive objects in front of the camera, they pose for her, reasserting themselves as active subjects within a loving relationship. In this particular case, where does insubordination reside? The theorist Nelly Richard gives a possible answer. I quote, "Soul's infarct teaches us that not all the escape routes to the fixity of a one-dimensional subjectivity must speak the same magnificently transgressive language. That is to say, that also minimal gestures of disobedience create intimate and tiny rebellions in the micro-insurrectionary scene of human life." End of quote. The gift of the photographic discourse of Errázuriz lies in the way the artist managed to help these abused bodies to elude, imaginatively, the system of symbolic oppression and repression that seek to immobilize them in fixed role of gender or insanity, for example, that are regarded as minor or insignificant. After all, each and every photographic model of Errázuriz could be described as subjects that nonetheless use their scorned identities to graft tiny everyday subterfuge with which they incredibly transgress the stereotype reductionism of marginality, indigence, insanity, and prostitution. Thank you. Paz Errázuriz camera focuses on topics that society doesn't look at, developing an artistic approach that shows a constant ethical concern to communicate and preserve the forgotten or repressed memories. Her intention is simple: to encourage people to dare to look. Okay. My third part is called Living Peripheria. I think I'm going to do it faster. Between 2006 2007 and 2011, the young photographer Alejandro Olivares carried out a photographic essay called Living Peripheria. The project was to document the lives of the young people living in conditions of extreme violence and poverty in a shanty town of Santiago. So his photographic series testify of a strong community with the work of Chilean photographers of the 70s and the 80s, not only in terms of the style of documentary practices, but from the consciousness that underlies them, a certain respectful look towards the forgotten and marginalized populations. So, Living Peripheria dives in a forgotten world where many times not even mailmen or taxi drivers are allowed in. White ghettos in the remote corners of Santiago where, for years, the state has managed to dump all those that it would rather not see, all those that capital investors must never see, those that rich people should better keep ignoring. If black and white photographs can evoke the idea that what they show is in the past, the color images of Olivares changed the Barthesian formula, "Saete," this has been, into a powerful "this is, here and now." So the subject portraits in Living Peripheria are not only not concerned by capitalism logic of consumerism, but are radically excluded from the national narrative of contemporary Chile. In this sense, the photographic act that Olivares carries out constitutes a disruptive practice that shows a crack in a system that would like to be smooth and flawless. The portrait of violence, misery, and social abandonment also exhibits the broken promises of the neoliberal miracle, promises of development, welfare, and social integration. In the dialogue entitled Intellectuals and the Power between Foucault and Deleuze, the former asks, are those who act and struggle mute, as opposed to those who act and speak? My answer would be certainly not. But in a context of a society defined by the hegemony of money, those who struggle to survive are clearly not invited to speak. In the particular case of photography, it is not about talking in place of somebody else, but rather of giving the unseen a visibility, which was non-existent before. The challenge would be then to replace the invisibility produced by the exercise of power with the visibility provided by art. In this sense, there is not an act of representation, but a committed act of presentation. In the case of Living Peripheria, the photographic gesture of portraying the marginalized subjects takes them out of a logic of accountability, as for example, to be considered as a number or a percentage of people living under the line of poverty. Moreover, it gives them a face, a sensible presence. As Pazarrazus had done before, Alejandro Olivares offers a powerful invitation to dare to look. As Georges Didier Berman said, an image emerging from darkness comes our way. It emerges so that what we see in it may really concern us and thus may touch us in some way. End of quote. Certainly, we cannot be indifferent when being confronted with these images, as the critical rescue of these bodies produces a sensible reaction on the viewer that is composed of effects and affects, as would say Deleuze. If it would be naive to say that the photographic act will help these subjects to overcome their present situation, it is naive to say that these photographs draw an ethic horizon, potentially inscribing in the viewer a will for social change. The violent reality capture in Living Peripheria could be then the starting point of a collective reflection on what model of education we want to implement, or how to reduce the huge gap separating the poor and the rich. After all, the image is a kind of consciousness, producing, in this case, an enlightenment amongst the shadows. The students' movement that started in Chile in 2011, questioning the logic of neoliberalism capitalism and its inequality model, in addition to the protests and demonstrations that now challenge the hegemony of the market, show that the fuse of social change is lit up. Okay, I can finish here. So, I just read one last. If Foucault points out the pervasive heterogeneity of power, it is also true that micro-political gestures of insubordination are also possible, and moreover, necessary. Confronting the viewer to a radical otherness, the works of Erasmus and Olivares show that the insurrectional power of these photographs has the potential to disrupt everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maira, for this interesting point of view about Chile. We have now a presentation in Portuguese. Carolina Junqueira dos Santos, é uma pós-doutoranda no Departamento de Antropologia da Universidade de São Paulo e é doutorada em Artes pela Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais. Vai-nos apresentar a comunicação O Rosto Perdido, Notas sobre uma Busca, e que fala das relações entre fotografia e memória a partir de uma instalação de 13 artistas na Argentina.
Olá. Sorry for not speaking English. But my title in English is like The Lost Face, Notes on a Search. It's about the robbery of babies and children during the Argentinian dictatorship. And it's about the abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, which they are grandmothers who is searching since then, like 40 years, looking for the children. Not children anymore, but okay. So let's go. O Rosto Perdido, nota sobre uma busca em 3 atos. 1. Argentina, março de 1976. Um golpe militar instala o terrorismo de Estado naquele que seria um dos países mais assolados por torturas e assassinatos da América Latina. Autodenominada Processo de Reorganização Nacional, a ditadura argentina, que durou pouco mais de 7 anos, deixaria cerca de 30 mil desaparecidos. Em abril de 77, um ano após o golpe, algumas mães desamparadas começaram a se juntar na Praça de Maio, diante da sede do governo em Buenos Aires, para tentar descobrir o paradeiro de seus filhos. Tendo sido considerados subversivos, eles foram alvo imediato dos militares, que não deixaram sobreviver sequer rastros de seus corpos, como forma de também fazer desaparecer qualquer vestígio dos assassinatos. Ingênuas ainda, aquelas mães desejavam solicitar uma audiência com o presidente e saber o que acontecera com cada filho, onde estariam detidos, quando e como seriam julgados. O tempo não tardou a mostrar que os jovens não voltariam, não reapareceriam e cumpririam, por décadas, o lugar incerto e devastador de desaparecidos. Aquelas mulheres, conhecidas como as Madres de Plaza de Maio, foram ganhando corpo e visibilidade no espaço público, convocando, através de sua presença permanente, o olhar do Estado, do povo e da imprensa estrangeira. Naquele momento, não era permitido o agrupamento de pessoas nas ruas, como forma de prevenir manifestações e supostas conspirações. Assim, com o impedimento de estarem juntas e paradas, as mães começaram a andar em torno da praça, colocando o corpo coletivo em movimento, fazendo do grupo um lugar nunca estático, mas absolutamente vivo, vivo através da espera indissolúvel que elas passaram a viver. Há 39 anos, aquelas mulheres caminham na praça, cumprindo a ronda semanal que se repete ainda hoje a cada quinta-feira. Elas permanecem lá, sempre em movimento, não deixando desaparecer jamais a ausência dos que foram brutalmente assassinados, sem corpos e sem os devidos ritos funerários. Carregando seus próprios corpos nessa luta, com os lenços amarrados nas cabeças, portando retratos e nomes dos filhos, essas mulheres se tornaram a grande porta-voz dos direitos humanos no país. Dentre essas mulheres, saídas daquelas primeiras madres que rondavam a praça em 77, surgiram as abuelas de Plaza de Maio, mães de desaparecidos políticos que guardavam, entretanto, uma diferença. Eram também avós de crianças desaparecidas. As abuelas juntaram-se em uma associação própria em outubro de 77 e, desde então, procuram cerca de 500 crianças roubadas pela ditadura militar. Até a data presente, em uma busca ininterrupta de quase 40 anos, foram encontrados somente 119 netos e netas. Essa busca traz à luz uma das práticas mais perversas da era ditatorial, e acredita-se que havia um plano sistemático de roubo de filhos de prisioneiros, como se aquelas crianças fossem despojos de guerra, aquilo que sobra do inimigo para ser partilhado. Algumas crianças foram sequestradas junto de seus pais e deles tiradas. No caso de prisioneiras grávidas, esperava-se em cativeiro o nascimento dos filhos quando os tiravam das mães para serem entregues a famílias e amigos de militares e registrados como filhos legítimos e biológicos deles. A mãe prisioneira, depois de servir como mero corpo gestacional do bebê, era então assassinada e a criança cresceria sem conhecer a sua identidade original. Mas as abuelas se lançaram à busca, tentando tecer o impossível. Através de pesquisas genéticas inéditas, foi desenvolvido na década de 80 um método para comparação de DNA na ausência dos pais, que validaria em 99,9% a restituição de um neto à verdadeira família, estabelecendo o vínculo pela análise do sangue de familiares maternos e paternos como mapa genético. Foi criado, por exigência das avós, o Banco Nacional de Dados Genéticos, que guarda as combinações sanguíneas de todas as famílias. Cada neto encontrado é um crime que se desvenda, havendo uma imediata verificação dos fatos, com julgamentos e penas a serem cumpridas pelos sequestradores ou apropriadores das crianças. Os netos vivos são a prova inelutável do crime. 2. Centro Cultural Recoleta, Buenos Aires, novembro de 1998. Uma mostra de arte é idealizada para dar nova visibilidade à busca das abuelas. Concebida pelas avós, junto à diretora da instituição, que notara, meses antes, o grande fluxo de jovens que frequentava aqueles espaços, a mostra convocou 13 artistas argentinos para que, a partir das fotografias dos pais desaparecidos, fossem criadas obras que anunciassem a busca pelos filhos roubados e servissem potencialmente como mediadoras de um reencontro com a origem. Naquele momento, esses filhos teriam a mesma faixa etária dos pais quando desapareceram, em torno dos 20 anos de idade. Esses jovens eram agora chamados em direção a um espelho, real e simbólico, que pudesse lhes devolver a identidade perdida. Desde a década de 80, houve uma grande presença e visibilidade do trabalho das abuelas no país, a partir das mais diversas mídias. Programas de televisão, entrevistas, noticiários, teatro, música, cinema, animações, livros e propagandas serviram como forma de convocar crianças, jovens e adultos que pudessem dar pistas, fazer denúncias ou mesmo desconfiar de ser, si mesmo, parte da história mostrada pelas abuelas. A força de visibilidade dessa busca é imensa na Argentina e cada neto encontrado gera uma enorme exposição midiática. A instalação de 98, portanto, era mais um evento na incansável empreitada das avós. Os artistas reunidos em seus diversos encontros para conceber a mostra decidiram unir seus esforços e criar uma obra única e coletiva que pudesse focar absolutamente na ideia do rosto perdido. Composta por uma linha ininterrupta nas paredes da galeria, formada por retratos fotográficos e espelhos postos à altura do olhar, a instalação, a que se chamou de Identidade, desejava explicitamente colaborar na busca dos filhos roubados. Mais de 100 metros lineares percorriam os espaços expositivos em uma espécie de quebra-cabeça entre os retratos e os espaços vazios compostos por espelhos, estes que refletiam todo o resto, os outros retratos e o rosto do espectador. Além desses dois elementos centrais, um pequeno texto se agregava à obra, com os dados disponíveis de cada caso apresentado, nomes e idades dos pais desaparecidos, as circunstâncias do sequestro e alguma informação sobre a criança perdida, como a data aproximada em que teria nascido. Também compunha a exposição um vídeo com testemunhos, o retrato de uma mulher grávida antes de ser sequestrada e a poesia que escrevera para o filho, informações sobre crianças já restituídas, além dos dados conhecidos sobre aquelas nascidas em cativeiro e as sequestradas junto dos pais. Para além, havia uma urna em que se poderia deixar recados e fazer denúncias sobre possíveis roubos, mensagens que iriam diretamente às abuelas. Cerca de 170 fotografias em preto e branco de homens e mulheres jovens ocupavam a linha contínua nas paredes. Posando sozinhos ou como casais, os corpos que agora chegavam à galeria estavam perdidos há duas décadas. Essas imagens não era assim que estava na galeria, é naquela forma de linha, mas isso são as imagens clássicas dos desaparecidos que as mães e as avós portaram junto ao corpo durante, desde então, há 40 anos. Esses mesmos retratos tinham sido levados massivamente a público desde então, portados pelos familiares em manifestações nas ruas, diante da imprensa e nos tribunais. Cada rosto impresso na instalação falava não somente de sua ausência ali, mas de seu desaparecimento ao longo de 20 anos e da força de sua presença durante esse mesmo tempo. Incansável, o rosto impresso no retrato convoca sua permanente visibilidade, que agora serve também para chamar um outro, o filho perdido. O espelho aparece, então, como espaço a ser preenchido nessa árvore genealógica incompleta anunciada pela instalação. A fotografia do desaparecido é a prova de que, algum dia, no passado, aquela pessoa esteve presente, de que existiu. É também aquilo que anuncia o desaparecimento. O que restou foi somente a imagem, que não muda, não envelhece e faz permanecer o corpo no mesmo estado em que fora tomado pelo dispositivo fotográfico. A fotografia do desaparecido é, portanto, documento e prova, além de ser um novo corpo visível e tangível no qual a mãe, a avó, familiares e amigos projetam um corpo perdido. Corpo que insiste em permanecer via retrato fotográfico, rompendo com a perecibilidade da carne a cada volta da imagem nas ruas, na plaza, nos julgamentos em tribunais, no centro cultural, onde, agora, reafirma uma existência e permanece presente. O retrato fotográfico não desaparece e não se decompõe. O rosto impresso na imagem é prova, mas também fantasma. É identidade, mas jamais fixa, pois o rosto se transforma continuamente. Por isso, era preciso ir além, e as avós encontraram no sangue a certeza para a confirmação da identidade perdida dos netos. A codificação genética tomara, então, o lugar identitário por excelência, mas a ideia do rosto permanece na busca das avós como instância de possível semelhança dos filhos com os pais. É uma aposta na imagem do rosto como espaço de reconhecimento, encontro e vínculo. O espelho, tal como o retrato, revela o rosto, superfície que convoca a ideia de sujeito, com seus traços, linhas, gestos e expressões. Ainda que sempre invertida, a imagem que o espelho dá é aquilo que acontece agora, o que está neste instante diante dele. O espelho produz a imagem na contemporaneidade do corpo, do objeto que se coloca à sua frente. Se nos desviamos dele, nossa imagem desaparece. Na instalação Identidade, os espelhos portam o vazio de um rosto, a imagem desejada. Eles também multiplicam ao infinito os rostos desaparecidos que agora ocupam espaço, refletindo os retratos de homens e mulheres que esperam seus filhos. O espelho aguarda, paciente, aquele que nele se reconhecerá na comparação imediata com os retratos ao lado, tomando como medida a semelhança física com aqueles que só existem agora na fotografia. Tal como o retrato, o espelho dá um corpo àquele que está ausente, torna-o presente, ainda que na condição de uma potência. Na trama das imagens, retratos e espelhos se misturam, anunciam os ausentes à espera do filho, desaparecido de sua identidade original. No jogo infinito de reflexos, somos olhados por todos, pela multiplicidade dos olhares perdidos, dos corpos desfeitos, torturados, assassinados e roubados. Somos também olhados pelo vazio do espelho, que nos lança de volta o nosso próprio olhar, nosso próprio rosto, como se fôssemos, cada um de nós, também um filho perdido. A ideia do espelho foi amplamente utilizada na busca dos netos na Argentina, lançando ao reflexo do rosto a possibilidade da descoberta de si como um outro. No site da Associação das Avós, a estratégia se repete sem o espelho, mas com um espaço vago a ser preenchido. Ali encontramos os mesmos elementos presentes na instalação, retratos dos pais desaparecidos, os dados conhecidos e o espaço vazio, a espera. Os rostos dos pais se apresentam ali também como medida possível para um reconhecimento, no olhar para si que parte da imagem do outro. O espaço tomado por retratos e espelhos convoca passado e presente em semelhante medida. Ali acontece um encontro, mediado por ausentes e presentes. O retrato porta um corpo perdido, desaparecido, mas é justo ele quem anuncia o outro corpo, o corpo do filho, e é a fotografia, estática e antiga, que produz uma margem de possível semelhança com o presente. O espelho, ainda que vazio, guarda a possibilidade latente de refletir o rosto do filho, de refletir o nosso rosto e de ser um artifício contra o desaparecimento. 3. Argentina, dezembro de 2004. Em homenagem à luta das abuelas, é sancionada a lei que estabelece no país o Dia Nacional do Direito à Identidade, que se comemora na data de criação da Associação das Avós, 22 de outubro, e que prevê jornadas de conscientização e a reafirmação da busca. A palavra identidade carrega um sentido particular naquele país, construída a partir daquilo que se acredita como direito inalienável. tornou-se, ao longo dos anos, a palavra-chave na busca das avós, constando até mesmo na marca da associação. Não por acaso é também o nome da instalação concebida para colaborar na busca dos netos. Mas do que é constituída a identidade de uma pessoa para que esteja perdida e para que se possa reencontrá-la? Trata-se da origem biológica e laço sanguíneo, do nome, sobrenome, do rosto, da vida que correu até o dia atual? Essa é uma questão complexa que aparece em alguns casos de restituição de netos na Argentina, pois enquanto alguns trocam até o nome próprio, outros não desejam sequer mudar o sobrenome, o que é obrigatório tendo em vista o crime de apropriação ilegal evidenciado. Muitos netos e avós falam de uma espécie de recuperação de identidade, mas qual identidade poder-se-ia recuperar se, afinal, eles já possuem um sentido de identidade, ainda que construído de forma não calcada em laços sanguíneos e legais? Existe já uma identidade e isso é inegável. Toda identidade é uma construção, mesmo aquela que vem de uma família biológica. Para além dos laços de sangue, há o tempo das relações de um indivíduo com o outro e com o mundo, e assim se constitui ao longo da sua história a ideia que tem de si mesmo, o seu lugar de reconhecimento. Assim, ainda que tendo a identidade original recuperada, um neto encontrado jamais poderá fazer uma transição imediata. Uma nova construção deverá acontecer, levando em conta a identidade anterior, que não é exatamente falsa, mas real e a única conhecida até aquele momento. A substituição da identidade de crianças e bebês roubados foi uma forma explícita de fazê-los desaparecer, sem, contudo, matá-los. Mas agora, desconstruir a identidade anterior, a que fora vivida até o encontro com a verdade tardia, também é uma forma de fazer desaparecer aquele que existira até ali. Ainda que se mude o nome e o sobrenome, a concepção que se tem de família, origem e identidade restará sempre algo da constituição anterior. O rosto permanecerá o mesmo, ainda que agora se encontrem novas semelhanças nas fotografias dos pais biológicos. Mas os corpos estarão para sempre marcados por suas experiências, as que vieram antes, as do momento da descoberta e aquelas que virão no desenrolar da dupla identidade. Ainda que o sangue tenha se tornado o elemento legitimador do vínculo familiar na busca das avós, ao descobrir-se portador de outra identidade, outra família, origem, outro nome, sobrenome, o que parece permanecer no indivíduo como marca identitária visível e irredutível é o rosto. Essa parte do corpo que carrega o inexorável valor simbólico de constituição da ideia de pessoa. A instalação apresentada recorreu inteiramente à estratégia de convocar o rosto como elemento central de identificação. Mas o que se torna curioso é o uso do retrato fotográfico de uma pessoa na busca de outra, baseando-se na ideia de uma possível semelhança. O que se desejava era que, diante do retrato da mãe ou dos pais, um jovem reconhecesse o seu próprio rosto na imagem, semelhança que poderia ser confirmada no espelho. Na ausência de fotografias dos netos roubados, um novo artifício se criou, na crença de que o rosto dos pais convoca o rosto do filho, e o espelho, com sua imagem em movimento, viva, contemporânea, é o que certificaria o vínculo dos corpos. O retrato e o espelho aparecem ambos como instâncias reveladoras de uma identidade possível, apreensível pela imagem. A fotografia se torna, aqui, prova de vida, de desaparecimento e de uma suposta continuidade na imagem do espelho. Obrigada.
Thank you, Carolina. I invite you all to come now and open the debate. I want to know if there is some questions in the room. No one want to open? There is no questions? Well, I have questions. I have questions. No, I have questions. No, eu não sou lucky. Well, I begin with Jen and John about the work that amazing work at Peloton and the efforts to create a memory of these challenges so hard to the people that live there. My question is about the scope of the work that you are doing, and how the forms that we present this kind of work with the people that live there, and with the entrepreneurs of this kind of changings in the city. What is the relationship and some of your experience between these two sides, so opposites, in your project?
I've lived on the estate since 1992, so I obviously know people very well in my area, part of my area. It's quite a substantial area. Kind of relating to some of the talks that we've had about struggles and resistance and some of the stuff that Steve mentioned yesterday, one of the real problems with the estate is obviously the estate has been allowed to run down since the 1980s. You know, it's pretty, you know, we have gates around our community, around our blocks, not to protect the rich from the poor, but to protect the poor from the very, very poor. You know, it's that desperate parts of the estate. So it's a very particular type of accumulation we're talking about here. So one of the problems that we have is that when they actually started to tear down parts of the estate, so one of the images I showed of the spectacular space, it was really cleverly photographing one half of the estate that was going to be made beautiful again, but actually the bit at the back of the image you couldn't see was being totally cleared and privatized. So it was kind of a very interesting kind of manipulation of vantage point. The problem we had, though, is that, and other friends we have who are working we have a friend working in a thing called the Salford Star, trying to agitate a little bit, is that the community is so fragmented that they don't care. Any change is good change. And trying to make, maybe say, people in my block who are getting new kitchens, new bathrooms, and a nice shiny outside to the block, and to say, well, actually our comrades on the other side of the estate are being thrown out of the area. Don't want to. So it's difficult to be politically involved in a space where you don't want to be vanguardist on one level, but you feel that the testimony or the record or the witnessing or the storytelling needs to be done, despite the fact that, you know, the traditional ways you might work with local community. I mean, some of this, we have tried to engage with people, but we've had very, how would you put it?
Indifference?
Yeah, well, I think because John said people, there's no sort of core of resistance to the gentrification process. There are individuals who've resisted. There's one man who stayed in his home in the middle of a demolition site, and for years, and with his children. And he, you know, so there are individuals.
But this is isolated cases
yes.
without a sense of community.
Yeah,
but even the community said about this gentleman. Some women walked past one day and said, "Oh, he's scum him. He's just holding out for more money."
Yeah.
You know, and it's a really fragmented class situation.
And I suppose we've tried to talk about how that process, that kind of attrition, is part of the process of demoralising an area to the point where there's no one has anything invested in it. I mean, that's not true. People still see it as home, but the process is aiming to devalue it in everybody's eyes. But I think the other thing is, we talked in the presentation about this issue to do with socially engaged, or, you know, relational aesthetics, dialogic practice, whatever you want to call it. And you know, we're having a major issue with that, actually. And I think it's informed our understanding of, like, well, actually, we are there. John's lived there. You know, we've got long-term associations with the area. Maybe we're not the typical person who lives there, but we have a vested interest in responding and recording the area. So I think we've started with ourselves. I think the other thing is that when we've done some walks with people, and actually the time people are so destroyed that if you work with them, you can't work with people, you can't exploit these people. You actually have to be their friend for life. And that's a very different commitment to doing a socially engaged project for 3 months and then making it into an art gallery.
Yeah. So, for example, we worked with one of the guys who lives on my block. He's moved in there in 1971. We did a big project with him. And, of course, as soon as we finished it, we did a book chapter. He's in it. We gave him copies of the book. Unfortunately, because we're as academics, we're cultural workers, but we're also wage slaves. We get up very early, we go to bed very late, we have no weekends free. We couldn't turn up to see him every week. I think he expected us every weekend to take him out for coffee. We'd love to. Yeah. We have no time. We haven't got time to go out coffee, And now when I see him, he feels like...
Disappointed,
Disappointed, and it's upsetting because you think, we don't try to use you. It's that we are, I don't know if they have the phrase we have a phrase in England of being time poor. We have no time. It's like, if you want to, my students want to see me, book me in. I've got a window at 3 weeks. Yeah.
Other questions? Other people? Steve?
Yeah, I want to ask about the uses of the image because, first of all, it was very peculiar because my brother used to live on that estate in the 1980s.
Okay.
So sort of seeing that again was kind of, I wouldn't say nostalgic because you got rocked 3 times a year, but it was kind of taking me back to another moment. But I thought all 3 presentations have very different kind of politics of the image. So there are 3 quite distinct kind of practices, and it's clear to me in one sense how the Argentinian material was used. Its use in one sense, right? So it's an immediately political or social practice. What I want to know is how the other 2 presentations, how your work is used, what you do with it, or what were they books, Maria, or what were they? And just one comment about social engaged practices, because I can see right that there's a kind of there's an issue about being embedded, right? Whereas one of the things that makes that kind of relational practice or social engaged practice, whatever you want to call it, feasible, is a kind of aeroplane ticket in the back pocket. You go to somewhere, you do your project for that's usually sponsored by the gallery, and you leave. And what that means, I think, is that the social engagement is not the same, right? So whether you're at the Hackney Flashes, living and working in Hackney, or your project in Manchester, there's a very different interpersonal relationship that gets built up around those things. And I think that's a really interesting point to think about. And that hadn't occurred to me that how important that travel is in social engaged practice. Yeah. But so I just invite you to say something about how the image is used, what they were for, how they circulate, what people did.
Well, in the case of Erasmus, this photographic essay was published in the form of a book, as I said. Each one of these essays has a book. So, and each one of them has also text which describes the experience. And for me, what is important is that the photographers didn't use, as you say, didn't use their subjects like, oh, this is, I don't know, it's shocking, let's take a shot. And then be exposed everywhere, because it satisfies the curiosity of the first world also, That's why I was talking about, we live in the periphery. I'm from Chile, though, so it's the last country in South America. And these people portrayed are in the most possible periphery of the periphery. So for me, the political gesture gives them a face, a sensible presence. And then...
Sorry, but for them, do they...
No, I think I think that this kind of work is not directly done for the photograph subjects, but for the viewer. Because if you feel concerned about it, if you feel touched about it, I think my thesis is to believe in this humanity, in this shared humanity, and that you cannot continue living like saying, well, I don't know this situation, I don't care about it. Because no, it's your country, it's your society, they are human beings. So for me, this inscription in the network of hegemony, by the way of publishing a book, by the way of exposing in Chile or in North America and Europe, is a way of saying they exist and they are important. So.
The books are publishing after the leadership.
Yes, and that's important to say that the first book, Adam's Apple, was published in 1990, I think, and just one book was sold. One. So that's to say that in the context the work was done, it had no repercussion because Chile was still living in fear. So we prefer to forget all this violence, all this poverty. Let's turn the page.
Were they published in Chile?
Yes, but now there's also an English version of it, and so it's now circulating, and that's important. And the book, and I couldn't find it. So Pastor Rasui said, it's clear that this work was done maybe not for the time it was produced, but for the future. And it's in the future where it will have viewers.
That's a great segue. Because
coffee later, yeah.
Thank you. Because I think one of the things that we didn't talk about, because it starts to get very complex and it's incomplete, is that we're thinking of this body of work as a kind of archive for the future, and so we sort of take elements from it and do things with them in public, and we tend to try not to present that as work in progress and as research and as things that people can look at and really get their hands onto. And we also include texts and sort of theoretical texts and images into sort of archival presentation. And we're doing, I think there are issues with that, but we can't go into them now. But we're doing, the thing that we are doing in the near future is there's a museum in Manchester called the People's History Museum. And we sort of felt that was a good context for us to show our ongoing collection and to talk about the politics of housing within the context of people's history. And that we feel quite comfortable that that's something to try. But we haven't really resolved it. I think we like doing live things because we like talking to people, and we like. But also, we're working in a lot of different media, and it's kind of all quite unresolved. But at this point, we're going into a new phase where I think we can spend more time on our work and really try and make something of all this material, because there's a phenomenal amount of material that we haven't really processed yet.
Because I think there is this kind of aspect, there is a kind of ethnographic aspect to the idea that, in a sense that you're going into communities and getting these stories. But I think also, I guess, bringing it back to the left is the idea that often in terms of photography and the left, I guess in some ways, although Lefebvre did not believe photography could have any role in the kind of spatial understanding, I think there is a kind of need for the left to realize that, if you read Harvey, he talks about the first circuit of capital is about making money through industry, the traditional way that when, the 19th century and so on. The 21st century is the second circuit of capital, where basically if you have hundreds of millions of pounds to invest, it's safer to put it into property. So actually property is now the new economic driver of capital accumulation. And I think we need to get away from just seeing housing as, oh, poor people live in bad housing, it's really bad. No, actually, it's a vehicle to transform into profit, and the left need to deal with it head on, I think. So I guess trying to develop a language for that.
Thank you.
There is some questions? I have just one question for Carolina, that is about this kind of body of work that was doing with these portraits and this searching for more portraits, for more identities. There is a work that was doing in the very artistic context, or like you have shown us, or there is also a kind of political or more social and institutional work that in the way that it's necessary constitute a body of archive about all these images, about this subject.
I don't know if I understood your question. It's about...
The question is about if there is some institutional practices that are constituting an archive of this body of work of images, of if they are only being used by this movement, by the movement of abuelas, and by the artists. If there is any interest, institutional interest, and public interest in Argentina about the preserving of this body of images and this relationship with the history of Argentina?
Well, I really don't know, but I think the most preserving way is these associations of madres and abuelas, because they are like for 40 years holding these pictures, and I think it maybe if the pictures were in an institution like a museum or something like that, it wouldn't be so powerful, because the pictures are on the street, like every week on Thursday. Every week they are like circulating and holding these portraits and holding this face, and so I think the great institution is not institution, but is their bodies on the street.
So if you don't have any questions, it's time to lunch. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presence.